Not just do you believe it's man-made, but what do you do about it? And here's one of the reasons that this is going to be a big issue in the campaign, I think, is that the next president is going to come in and have to make some decisions about climate change policy pretty quickly. President Obama, of course, has moved forward with very aggressive actions using his executive authority. He's put forth big EPA regulations, cutting emissions from coal-fired power plants, cutting emissions from cars. Republicans are campaigning against this. They call these job-killing regulations. They call them a war on coal. At the end of this year, President Obama is expected to sign on to an international accord that will commit the United States to cutting carbon emissions up to 28% over the next year. If the next president is going to adhere to that accord, they're going to have to come in and start taking even more actions, pushing a bill through Congress, putting forth new regulations. If they're not, if they're going to say, well, we reject that accord, the United States is not going to keep its word on that accord, that's a really big deal, too. This is not going to be this is not kind of a voluntary question. The next president is going to come in and have to say and campaign on, are we going to continue to move on Obama's regulations, or are we going to try to repeal them? You know, these are all action items that the next president is going to have to face pretty early on in the next administration. That's one reason why I don't think they can avoid this question in a way that they have in previous campaigns.
One element within the polling was that if you looked at Republicans, they did say that they believe that any type of these regulations being put forward, it could have detrimental effects to the economy. So at least from if you look at it from a political standpoint, that belief is still very much alive in GOP circles. So I'm sort of fascinated to see how this needle is thread. Is how can you come out as a Republican and say, all right, something needs to be done about climate change, but we have to figure out a way that's economically feasible. And that's not so easy, as we saw back in 2009 when there was a stimulus money to a place like Solyndra, one of these green energy jobs that were touted by Democrats. It became a complete feeding frenzy for the GOP operative machine. So it's a very tough line to walk for them. It's interesting to see what type of sort of policy can come about. I mean, would you be surprised if a Republican candidate could come at climate change saying there is an economic impact if you have more domestic growth in green energies? It's been almost like a Democratic talking point for some time.
Well, so one Republican who is so interesting on this and who says he is exploring, putting together an exploratory committee is Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina. Don't know how seriously to take that contention, but he is saying he's thinking about running for president. Senator Graham is very interesting because he is right out there in front saying human-caused climate change is real. We've got to do something about it. In the past, he worked with Democrats, in fact, with former Senator John Kerry, on a cap-and-trade climate change bill that would have put a price on carbon emissions, raised the cost of coal-fired electricity. He pulled out of that bill before it went anywhere, but that's on his record. And he says this is a problem for the Republican Party. Republicans have to develop some kind of environmental plan or policy. They don't have really a real environmental platform. So, he's someone I think who will be very interesting to watch in this space. Yeah. How do Republicans come up with an environmental platform without, to address climate change? Every economist will say you pretty much have to tax or regulate fossil fuel pollutions. That's really hard to square with what a lot of the big donors and the base want, but unfortunately that is the solution. So I would watch Senator Graham to see if he might put forth something that he thinks his party can support, even if his candidacy maybe doesn't go all the way.
Yeah, he's one more inclined to have a policy because one of the state's largest economies is the city is at risk of being flooded in almost any given hurricane season. We'll get you out of here with this one. How much pressure is put on the Republican donor by the Republican donor machine on these candidates? We know Koch-back Industries, they've pretty much vowed to go against any Republican that's going to try and move a climate change agenda. Tough to get off the ground because of the donor pressure.
Yeah, this is one of the real reasons why this is so hard is There's no question that the advocacy groups and the super PACs that get funding from the Koch brothers are very clear on this. If a Republican comes out and says this is a problem, I support taxes and regulation, all that money is going to get funneled into making sure they lose their primaries. So, you know, what is a Republican candidate to do? It's such a, you know, you've got the donors saying big influential donors on one side, and then you're looking at these numbers on the way you need to talk about this issue in a general election, and they are in complete opposition. It's such a difficult spot, I think, for these candidates going into the primaries.
Very difficult indeed. Worth noting, the only 2012 Republican presidential hopeful that is said that climate change was real, John Huntsman. You saw how well that went for him.
I think he never had more than 1%, 1 to 2% of the vote.
Very tough, very tough. Coral Davenport from the New York Times, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us about this. We appreciate it.
Sure, great to be with you.